Motivation is a result of two basic concepts. The first one is need, and the second one is faith or belief. I can have voluntary action only if I'm motivated, and I can be motivated only if I have needs and I believe that this action can satisfy this need. Then we say that need plus belief actually will give me my motivation. Now, can I have voluntary action according to this diagram if I have no needs? We say the total absence of needs reduces you to a vegetable. So is it important tonight that you have needs? I'm thinking of this one man. He didn't really have any needs, but he had heard that everybody was supposed to have them. And since he didn't have any, he thought there was something wrong with him, so he went to the psychiatrist. He was in the waiting room, and he was pacing back and forth, back and forth. Finally, he took out a cigarette. Then he took the paper off of it. He had all the tobacco in the palm of his hand, so he began to pick it up with his fingers and stuffed it into his nostrils. And after he had his nostrils packed full, he was standing there looking around for something, and the psychiatrist walked out. And the psychiatrist took one look at the cigarette paper on the floor and looked at his nostrils, and he said, he says, "I see you need my help." The man looked up at him and said, "Yeah." He says, "You got a match?" That's not the kind of need we're talking about tonight. We're talking about a genuine need that arises from any one of these negative feedback. Now, there is another way to arrive at need apart from negative feedback. And there's a reason why you should know the better way. Negative feedback always requires energy loss, does it not? Just look down the list of negative feedbacks. And furthermore, is this pleasant for me at the time? No. Would you like to know a way tonight to avoid even negative feedback? Now, if I could show you a way to arrive at need without negative feedback, would that be valuable? All right, here it is. The first illustration will be with negative feedback. I'm driving down the road and I start to put the brakes on and I slip. Then I realize there must not be too much tread on these tires. I go around a corner and I slide again. Am I receiving negative feedback? A little bit later I feel sort of a thud type feeling. And there's a flat tire. Is this still negative feedback? I get out, I fix the tire. By the way, is this an expenditure now of energy? I throw the tire into the trunk, and I take it in the store for a trade-in, and they say, because the cord is showing, no trade-in. Now, am I losing? I mean, there's a $2.50 for the usable casing, which I cannot have. By the way, this thread, can you see the worn thread on the tire and compare that to your nervous body? Have you ever worn yourself thin? That's because you've gone too long on negative feedback. There's another loss of energy too. It so happened before I had the flat tire, I was driving down another section of the road about 80 miles an hour. Now what do I think about while I'm driving? It's going to blow out for sure. Tire that slick. Now, does this cause a loss of energy? This is fear. Fear of a blowout. Now, let's go through the same story without any loss of energy whatsoever and no negative feedback. I'm driving down the road and I notice that the speedometer says 5,000 miles. I pull into the service station. While I'm having lunch, they rotate the tires. At 10,000 miles, I do the same thing. At 15,000 miles, I do the same thing. I happen to be told that when they put them back on at 15,000, that they're only going to be good for 5 more thousand. At the end of this time, I drive in, I say, would you put new tires on? Now, am I using reason? Through reason and through observation, I have arrived at need by knowledge, and have I had negative feedback yet? No negative feedback. Have I had any loss of energy yet? No. And will I have to fix a flat tire or worry about a blowout or slide? No. And I drive out of there with brand new tires. And by the way, we might throw in one more thing. I got $2.50 for each casing. Have I arrived at the same place that I did before? Both ways I ended up with new tires on the car. One way aged me with some wear and tear. The other way I was relaxed. Therefore, are we saying, can I have any achievement without need? Then it's essential that I arrive at a need in my life before I can achieve anything. And we said that we couldn't have happiness without achieving. And I can't be well adjusted unless I correct the problems in my life by solving my needs. The other day at the ranch, I wanted to reach something. It was up high. So I got me the ladder. This is an extension ladder. And I evidently had it upside down, so when I went to put my foot for the first rung, it wasn't there. It was just open space. It was a funny feeling. Of course, I turned the ladder around the right way and climbed up and reached whatever I was going after. But I thought at the moment, this is something like need. Need to me is the first rung in a ladder I'm going to share with you tonight called my step ladder of success. And how important then is this first step? Well, back to the situation at the ranch. If I didn't have that first rung in the ladder the way it was, I couldn't have climbed up the ladder. Now, in this step ladder of success, I use it to what we call fill in or bridge the gap. In other words, it's to help you accomplish something when you couldn't accomplish it any other way. I'll give you an illustration. The other day I was going to buy something. And after I had selected the article, I reached in to get my checkbook and I had forgot it. It was in my other suit. Well, I didn't feel any concern. I reached in to get some cash and I didn't have any cash. Another illustration. My little boy wanted to reach something up in the cupboard. He was too short. And he looked around the room looking for something. Now, had I had a little step ladder there with 4 steps, it would have been just what he would have desired. In other words, he could have used this to fill the gap. My step ladder tonight has 4 steps. And we call these the steps of achievement, and they spell G-U-T-S. And the first one is great, good, genuine, goal-oriented need. Now remember, we arrive at this first step in our ladder by negative feedback or by knowledge, which comes from observation or reasoning. Now we're ready for the second step in the step ladder. This is ultimate emotion. Everyone here tonight needs $1 million. But how many here tonight are millionaires? Do you really have everything you need? No, there's something wrong here, isn't there? Is it possible to have a need and not fulfill it? Right. I'll tell you why. A need is something strictly mental. We come about it, we can actually arrive at need by cold reasoning, without any other factor. Therefore, need is not enough to motivate you. In fact, you can be surrounded, or in fact even submerged in needs all of your life and do nothing. Step 2 is the gasoline to put into the car to make it go. In other words, if the need structure is the automobile, desire is the gasoline. So what I'm going to do on step 2 is actually put the desire with the need. Now, if I put desire with need, will I move? Pronto. There's no question about it. I'm on my way. But the most important thing is what kind of desire? And I'd like to define it tonight as insatiable. Paderewski was playing, and he finished the concert, and a gentleman walked up, and he told him this statement: "I would give my life if I could play like you." The famous musician turned around and coolly, calmly, with a pleasant smile, said, "I did." The only actual criteria to judge whether you're insatiable or not is whether you die or not. If you don't put your life on the line, you don't even mean it. I know this will get quite to home to a lot of you who've been playing around at life. I don't believe in that. I believe if I want to do something, I do it, And how much of myself do I give? Everything there is. If I can't give everything there is, forget it. It's not worth doing. Socrates was walking along by the Mediterranean, enjoying a nice morning, and a man came up. And he said, I want to know everything you know. Would you teach me? Socrates says, well, if you really mean business, we'll begin. You ready for your first lesson? The guy said, yes, I'm ready. So Socrates puts his arm around his shoulder, and the guy feels honored. This learned man is going to teach me. And he makes a right angle and starts toward the water. When they had their shoes wet, he thought, I should break loose from this hold, but really, though, this is my first lesson. I better stay with it, or I'll discourage him. He won't give any more lessons. They went right out into the water until they were waist deep. And then Socrates, he has a pretty good set of shoulders on him. He put a headlock on this guy and threw him underneath the water. And he held him there, and the guy kicked and squirmed trying to get loose, and finally he went unconscious. Then Socrates picked him up, carried him back to the shore, and dropped him on the sand. Now when this guy came to, he was mad. He says, I came down here to learn, and you practically kill me. No, Socrates says, I didn't kill you. He says, I gave you the first lesson. And the guy says, I just don't understand. He says, when you want to know what I know, as much as you wanted to live when you were underneath the water, then you will know what I know. Now, Socrates is telling us how bad did he want to learn what he learned? With his life. People have come up to me many times, and this is a common question, how do I get rid of fear? I don't want any more fear. I've had enough of fear. They don't believe it, and I don't believe them, because they love the stuff. If you got fear tonight, you love it. I turned around to one person. I said, all right, I'll tell you how I got rid of my fear. I said, if I had my choice for the next 2 minutes to fear or die, I would die. And they looked at me for a moment, and I said, as soon as you hate fear that much, will you ever fear again? Can you feel that now? That fight? That drive? Then what do I mean by insatiable? If I want to do something, the desire is measured in terms of my very life, will I do it? And if it's not measured in terms of my life, what should I do with the need? Forget it. There's one problem in desire. Where does the emotions come from? Does negative feedback involve emotions? You go down that list of negative feedback, and every one of them is an emotional feeling. What am I doing? When I arrive at need, I take the energy from my negative feedback and convert it to desire. You might think this is a beautiful way to make myself do something. And the other day I read a book, and believe it or not, somebody had capitalized on this, and they said, if you really want to do something, get mad. Then get madder, then get as mad as you possibly can get. It said, you'll build up such a head of steam that you'll be able to go out and do anything you want to do. Now, can you see that they have just begun to touch what we're getting into tonight? In other words, they're saying what? Build up negative feedback, transfer the energy to desire, and then you'll accomplish what you want to accomplish. Now, there's 2 reasons why you shouldn't do it. Number 1, do I lose energy in the process of transferring negative feedback to desire? Yes, there's an energy loss, and even in the transferring. And secondly, have I suffered in my body if I've let negative feedback continue more than 1/10 of a second? Yes, the man who got that angry had a heart attack before he achieved. If the way to build into my motivational system desire is not the result of negative feedback, then where do I get the actual emotions? Where is the emotion going to come from if desire was the result of knowledge? You see, I've almost shifted gears on you. I've assumed what? When I say I've arrived at need through knowledge. Do I have any negative feedback? Then where am I going to get my energy? In other words, I'm coming into it cold, am I not? Without any emotions at all. In other words, I have, through knowledge, decided that these tires should be replaced. Now, what is going to be the motivating factor in my life to cause me to do it? It's real simple, and I do this all the time with myself, and it ties right in with cybernetics. I visualize what it will be like to have achievement. And what does that visualization do to my energy supply, my emotions? Now, you can do it two ways. You can drive an old car until it falls apart. It can endanger your life on the highway. The windshield wipers might not be working properly. A dozen other things could go wrong with that car, and could you be receiving negative feedback? And finally, if you live long enough and you're not in an accident, in a fit of exasperation, you drive it on a lot and say, I don't want to see it anymore. All right, let's contrast it with somebody else. Through knowledge, he has observed that this car could be replaced, and through reasoning, he knows that a new car would serve him in different areas. He makes a decision that he has a need for a new car. Any negative feedback yet? No, the one he's driving is still in good condition. Now, some people can never trade a car in when it's still operating. I mean, why? They have not been thinking, and therefore is there any motivation to do anything until it falls apart? By that time, what's the trade-in? So this person actually decides through thinking that he needs a new car. Now, what's going to motivate him? There's no negative feedback to motivate him. He sits down and he visualizes a new car. He smells it. And is this all positive emotion? And then do you act? There's another reason why I like to arrive at my desire by visualization, because I have control of it. Sometimes when I correct from negative feedback, do I overcorrect? Have you ever in your life run into a situation where the negative feedback was so intense that you got so disgusted that you went out and corrected twice too much? Is that costly? Would a mature person actually avoid most of the negative feedback that we have listed? The third rung in our ladder, in our steps to achievement, is total environment. This total environment can be described as the means to achievement, or it could be the physical facilities. Another way to look at it, it's the methodology. It is where I actually put details into my goal and develop a plan by which I proceed. A completely different way to describe it might be to call it structure. In other words, this is the setting in which all achievement occurs. Let me give you an example. There was a lady who had taken the seminar and she wanted to lose 40 pounds. And she was using our steps to achievement to do it. It didn't work. She said, I visualized it, and I said, well, you don't have enough detail in your goal. So she found a magazine, and she cut out this beautiful 16-year-old girl in a bikini and pasted it on the refrigerator door. Now, she thought that that would give her some detail to her goal. Didn't work. So I was talking to her one day, and I said, now tell me the honest truth. No matter how much weight you lose, will you ever look like that girl? No, she says, I don't suppose I ever would. Says, why don't you go through the magazines and find a photograph of a woman 45 in a bathing suit with the figure which you would like to have. She found one, she put it on the refrigerator door, plus her girlfriend came over and cut the head off and took a snapshot of her and put her head on it. What do you suppose happened? Off came 40 pounds. You see what I mean now by detail in your visualization? Now, can you visualize executives with magazines and paste and scissors? One man cuts out from a travel magazine a nice photograph of the Bahamas. 1 year later, there he is with his family enjoying the beach. We say then by writing it out or by pasting it on something from a photograph, do I get detail in my goal? You know, all people who are really outstanding in their field and all businessmen that really are successful know that you really don't succeed unless you properly plan. It's interesting also to find out that most management texts list planning as one of the first prerequisites to good management. Men do not plan to fail, but fail to plan. Now, it's wonderful to have a goal, it's wonderful to have the desire, and it's wonderful to have a need, but I have to have mythology to carry it out. One gentleman who took the seminar decided that for 6 months he should have scrubbed the front porch. His wife had done everything that she could possibly do and had failed. And evidently there was no way to motivate him. So, after hearing the steps, he decided to follow them. He had the need, he had the desire, he visualized it clean, and all he needed now was a plan. So he went home that night, he put a bucket, a hose, a scrub brush, and soap by the porch. He set the alarm for when the sun comes up. The alarm goes off, the porch is clean. We had a little group pressure because he told us all about it the week before. And then the next week we asked him if he had been successful. Some people fear step 2, ultimate emotion, and the reason they fear this is because they don't want to be labeled a daydreamer. Now, a daydreamer is somebody who doesn't want to be bothered with the trivialities of step 3, our structure. Therefore, why don't you plan well? Why don't you use some good mythology? In fact, couldn't you love the minuteness of the physical means to carry out some of these lofty dreams? And then finally, let's construct as much detail as we can on our destination. Now, the last step of achievement. It's a mystical ingredient. In fact, it's almost magic, and it continues to puzzle the world. You just mention the word, motivation, and everybody just wants to hear everything you've got to say. Conferences use this all the time to attract people. Let me give you questions. Listen. How do I motivate my children? How can I motivate my husband, the employer? How do I make my men really want to work? Isn't this a common question? Don't you hear this every day? The truth. It can't be seen for looking. We try too hard. And then we just lose the relaxedness of this easygoing success we're trying to learn tonight. You know, if you have the first 3, then you've already got the 4th one. It's stick-to-itiveness. Mix 3 and then add the heat or the pressures that causes us always to reevaluate our efforts when we ask these questions. Is my goal really worthwhile? Do you suppose it's worthy of all this effort I'm putting into it? Some other concepts that might explain this could be refined emotion, dedication, consecration, determination, or a fighting faith that just doesn't know when to stop and it doesn't even know how to let go. Now, I would think that a lot of people do not know what faith means. First of all, I've had people say that I don't have any. Faith is in abundance everywhere. When I go into a drugstore with a prescription, do I believe in the pharmacist? Look at all those little bottles. All those little white pills, and they all look alike. And I don't even give him an eye test, do I? When I get on a plane, do I ask the stewardess to please have the pilot come back? I want to smell his breath. When I go into a restaurant, do I make the waitress take the first bite? I'm trying to show you that is your life at stake every time you turn around in this life? Did you know you can't take one step without faith? In fact, let's go further. Can I have a single voluntary action without faith? In other words, faith is 1/2 of all motivation. Motivation can be diagrammed as voluntary action, which is the result of motivation, which comes from 2 actual factors. Number 1, need, and number 2, belief or faith. I believe that if I do this, I will fulfill that need. And by doing that, I'm motivated and I have action. Therefore, without faith, can you do anything? Now, we're defining faith a little different than they do at church. People can have faith at church and believe that something's going to happen, and a year from now they still believe. The faith I'm talking about is synonymous with action. If you believe, what are you going to do? Do. What's the time interval? None. So in other words, faith means that I now believe, so I now do. If you do not do you believe? No, not at all. For an illustration of stick-to-itiveness, let's take Dr. and Madame Curie. And they worked for 4 years without giving up. Can you visualize taking these tons and tons of this crude minerals and working for 4 years until all they had left was a scum in the bottom of a saucer? And then thinking that they had nothing, they gave up. But it was interesting. You know what they were going to do the next morning? Order more pitch blende. For what purpose? The radium was in there. They just happened to miss it. So they're going to go through it again. But you know, that night they came by the lab, and sure enough, before they turned on the lights, they saw a glowing light. And that saucer that had the scum in it was glowing in the dark. And that's how they discovered radium. Now, do you know there were times when Madame Curie, from the smells and the coldness and lack of food and lack of money, would go unconscious? And her husband would pick her up to carry her out of the lab. By the way, the lab they gave him didn't have windows. It was in the winter time. It was cold and the odors were tremendous. Do you think that her husband could discourage her in any way to not come back in and go to work again as soon as she came to? You couldn't stop her. Now, had she for one moment thought about a warm bed, or thought about a delicious meal, or a half a dozen other nice things in this world, what would have happened to her determination? Would have been gone. She could not have made it unless she kept her mind on what? Radium. In other words, day and night she could only see one thing, radium. So we say then dedication is the result of singleness of purpose or singleness of eye. This means that I get my eye on one thing, and do I see anything else? There's only one thing that's going to exist for me, and I stay on this one thing. It's concentration, visualization. You can go into this by singleness of eye or one tract. And the opposite of that is distract. So in other words, we say that if I don't have a singleness of tract, I have distraction. And distraction causes me to lose my dedication. Now you have my favorite stepladder. If you will just follow these 4 steps, achievement will be inevitable. Why not prove it to yourself right now? Think of something that you have been wanting to do and you haven't done. Now, apply the 4 steps. What step are you on? Just the knowledge to know what step you are on will automatically program your subconscious. And this will allow you to conquer the next step. Achievement was yours. Now you're looking forward to a new goal. I met a stranger in the night whose lamp had ceased to shine. I paused and let him light his lamp from mine. A tempest sprang up later on and blew the world about. And when the wind was gone, my light was out. Then back again the stranger came, his light was glowing fine. He held the precious flame and lighted mine.